Tonight, well, they might not teach you everything at the Ivy League schools. The First Lady's fancy European vacation, smart or dumb? Well, first, let's get the facts. Ms. Lavish, Peter Nicholas, White House correspondent for the Tribune, Washington Bureau. The Bureau serves the LA Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Baltimore Sun, and other papers as well. Good evening.
Nice to see you, Greta.
All right, let's start with this trip. How many days was it?
Well, it was a 5-day trip. The plane took off from Washington on Tuesday, landed in Spain on Wednesday, and after lunch with the King and Queen of Spain, the First Lady and her daughter flew home.
All right, now, how many people were traveling with her?
Well, the First Lady's daughter, Sasha, was traveling with her. When they arrived in Spain, they were joined by a couple of friends of the First Lady's and 3 children. So it was a total of about 5 friends of the family who were there. But on top of that, there were also some White House aides and, of course, a contingent of Secret Service.
The First Family pays for a portion of this trip because it's some of it is personal as opposed to private? That's
correct. The First Family will pay for the equivalent of round-trip first-class airfare, and then we'll also pay for their hotel, which is not cheap. The rates at that hotel are $400 to $6,500. So they'll pay for that and also their meals, and then the government will pick up the expenses of the government personnel on the trip.
So give us some sort of idea. They paid about $7,400 per ticket for personally, right, the First Lady and for her daughter.
That's
and
correct.
Then how much it cost to run this Air Force plane?
The Air Force plane costs about $11,500 an hour to operate, and so given that it's about an 8-hour, 7.5-8-hour flight to Spain, probably costs a total of about $180,000. There's
the one issue in terms of the cost and what the taxpayers pay, and of course the First Family paid their portion, but there's also the sort of the political aspect, the
right,
PR aspect. She
sure,
had gone down to the Gulf and said we should vacation at the Gulf, and then she went to Maine and now off to Spain. Do you know, is there anything to suggest that the president thought this trip was a good idea?
Well, we don't really know what the White House thinks. The White House has just officially only said that this was a private trip. It was the First Lady's business. She wanted to show her daughter a part of the world, and this is what mothers and daughters do. The criticism has come from those who say, well, that's fine, but does it have to be a luxury, a vacation in a luxury resort? Couldn't it have been a domestic vacation, perhaps in the Gulf Coast? Did it have to be on this scale?
Well, she's got to be in a safe place. I mean, she is the First Lady, but we have Ritz-Carlton's, fancy hotels here in the United States, a lot of fancy. I think that one of the criticisms is what, why Spain? Because, why not use those dollars, those hotel workers, why not do it domestically, and why not, of course, near the Gulf, since you told everybody else to?
Right. Well, they are going down to the Gulf on Saturday. But
for how long?
For 1 day.
Well, that's not exactly a 5-day trip to Spain.
They'll be back on Sunday. And I'm not sure there's a 5-star hotel down there. Maybe they'll find one. I don't know. But yeah, I think that's the criticism. And the White House's position, though, is that this is a private trip. And I think the question is, does the public understand that, or will voters think, this is really government expense too here, and that has to be taken into account, given that we have 9.5% unemployment rate and high federal deficits.
Is there any indication since the trip, since she got back and sort of gotten out of the bubble of the security and being overseas, is there any indication that she's sort of revisiting the wisdom of taking a foreign trip at this time?
I don't think. My sense is that she might be somewhat chastened at this point, given all the publicity that this received, and we may not see any lavish foreign trips from the First Lady anytime soon.
Now, while she was in Spain on this trip, the president was in Chicago. Why did he go to Chicago?
Well, he wanted to raise some money he was on a fundraising trip. It was his birthday. He wanted to see friends. So it was an opportunity. His wife was away. His daughter was away. So he took the opportunity to go to Chicago and reconnect with some of his friends there.
Should we expect a statement from the President and First Lady about this trip? I mean, because where the press is obviously pounding for him, and for good reasons. I mean, she could have done a lot for stimulating the economy in some town here in the United States.
I don't think we're going to see an explicit statement. What I do think we're going to see is their answer may well be this trip to the Gulf Coast this weekend. That might be how they sort of answer their critics, by saying, look, we can do a modest domestic trip as well and show support for the Gulf Coast. So that might be their tacit answer to this.
Did they not learn, though, after when First Lady went down to the Gulf and said everyone should vacation at the Gulf, then she goes off to Maine with the family, and everyone was complaining about, you just told us to stay at the Gulf and now you go off to Maine. Didn't they learn or get it at that point?
Well, I think that this Spain trip was in the offing for a while. It had been planned, and the First Lady travels with these friends of hers. She's traveled with them before, so I think this is clearly something she wanted to do, but there's obviously been a public backlash about it, and my guess is there'll now be some rethinking that goes on before she takes off on another trip.
Peter, thank you.
Thank you, Greta.